Yep, yeah, should be. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm gonna maximize it and make it. Was it 19 folks over there? 19 folks. Next one. Yeah. Yes, yeah. I'm gonna do that. Just said they're in here. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Sure, please. Zoom always seems so, when you're watching somebody else do it, it's like, oh, that big button right there. But when you're trying to find it yourself, it's like you just absolutely can't. Let's see how this works.
It's Zoom.
Yeah. I'm trying to remove that thing.
All right, it'll just be, yeah, that is actually better. All right, so. On Polaris, so. Start by launching a job, or launching, so I usually work and prefer to use interactive jobs. I guess it's a lot of my work is I'm in there trying to figure out what's going wrong or running things, in a kind of iterative manner. And so it's maybe makes a bit more sense for me. And it's just how I've been used to doing things. But really when you're trying to do production runs on large scale systems, in an interactive session is not necessarily the best way to do it. And it's good to also be familiar with and have the ability to run whatever you might need to as a batch script, as a Q subscript. But for the time being, just work interactively. If I get this, that will work. So I don't know. This is how I do things. I usually try the preemptible queue first. You can get a bit longer times. Then otherwise I try, the debug queue for an hour. This maybe is something I shouldn't share, but if for me, when the debug queue takes too long to start up, I just scaling. Try that one too. Usually one of them will start up, and then I just kill the other one. But again, you didn't hear that from me.
I thought they only let you run one at a time. So you have two, you submit two when they complain.
So certain queues, there are certain queues have so I wouldn't be able to submit another one to either one of these.
I think you can only have one interactive job.
Yes, and per queue, so I wouldn't be able to have if I tried to. This is my terminal call, and it's called Kitty. It's just a Mac terminal, like an OS X terminal. Oh, that's right. Scale. Look at that. Thank you. No, I forgot about that. So now you're a good person and you kill your other jobs though. So and so this is another maybe eccentricity that this might only be a me thing, but for some reason whenever I get launched into an interactive job on Polaris, it always mangles my shell. So my lines get messed up. So I have these, again, this is stuff you can probably ignore, but I have some little scripts. So one shell, I save all the PBS information I need and then log into that shell from the login node, and then source, get that job environment. If now this one isn't all mangled. But that's a detail. And then and everybody should feel free to follow along. Hopefully this should all work for everybody. I think all the permissions and everything should be good to go. I've had somebody it's hard, right? You can't tell bugs that are due to permissions errors when like you're running files that you created. And so I had somebody else independently run it, and they said it worked for them. So hopefully it should be all sorted, but let me know obviously if anybody runs into anything. And so then it's in this projects. No, I guess deep speed. And so the issue that the possible issue I foresee is now maybe with everybody doing this. So for the sake of doing this for the workshop, we thought it would be useful to have, kind of a shared global, publicly readable virtual environment that everybody could kind of, activate and then run with instead of having to build all of the dependencies and everything day of. And so the only way in the 12 hours between when I decided that and had to get it done, the only way I could think to do it is to have this, globally public repo here. So if everybody navigates into this directory and tries running it at the same time, I don't know necessarily what'll happen, but we will see, I suppose. So that was the only thing. If people start running into weird errors, that could be what's called. Also, if feel free to stop or yell at me if something doesn't make sense or you have a question. Anybody stuck or confused on anything so far?
Is it run?
Sure. The nodes I've gotten my allocation. Also, so another thing, actually, maybe again about this idea of the distributed training. So if anybody was paying attention in that talk, I briefly touched on this little library I'm working on. That the basic idea of how it all works actually under the scenes is every time you're in an interactive job or you have an allocation, you have some host file. So on Polaris, you have this PBS node file. On Cobalt, it's like the Cobalt node file. On Slurm, you have environment variables and so on. But really, anytime you have any sort of job, you have a list of nodes that your job has access to. And really, when you want to run a distributed training process, you want to find out how many GPUs you have available total, and then in the most naive case, just run distributed training across all of that. And so one mechanism for doing that, if I have a list of each of the nodes available that are in my job, and then I can also get the number of GPUs on each of these nodes from this NVIDIA SMI command. So that it's just, I don't know, some trickery, but it basically returns the number of GPUs on each node. And then I can figure out the total number of hosts by looking at how many lines that file has. Find the number of GPUs on each of those hosts with this NVIDIA SMI, and then find the total number of GPUs by just multiplying them together, right? So that's another trick, but makes, it's useful for, just simplifying your life, or at least it has been for me. Anyway, none of that's really important for what we're going to do today, but things I've picked up that I found. So now we're in this directory, and I guess going back to the slides. So I had here. So right, just to double check that the instructions I'm giving in the slides are correct as well. So navigate into this directory, projects, this Argon ALCF Megatron Deep Speed, check. So next thing you need to do is load the Conda module and set up the virtual environment. So on Polaris, this most recent one, this 10.10-04. So load that module and activate the base Conda environment. See it's over here, good. Next, activate the virtual environment. So as I was kind of blabbering about a minute ago, there's this globally readable virtual environment in here. So VNVs, Polaris. You know, again, this is just maybe me being neurotic, but I like to make whenever in all of the base Conda environments on whatever system, I usually like to maintain separate virtual environments per project. And just for consistency's sake, usually name them, you know, machine candidate. So I think if you look at the rest of these instructions, that one thing that's nice about that is that it allows you to like write bash scripts and so on that you can just, that are portable across like Polaris, for example. All of the nodes on Polaris start with like X3 and Theta GPU, obviously start with Theta. But if you, you know, kind of do things in this way, then you will always know that your virtual environment is, you know, in your virtual environments machine with some candidate. Yeah.
So instead of doing modular conda, whatever, you just build your own Pythons and stuff like that.
So that's a good question. So it's a bit subtle too. So it's actually built on top of the Conda environment. So this, yeah, so right here. So you would first load the Conda module. So on Polaris, it would be this, you know, 1004. And then what I do, and I think it's probably a good practice, is inside that Conda environment, for each, you know, say I'm working on a bunch of different projects, they all have different dependencies and so on. And one way of trying to keep all of that straight is to have separate virtual environments for each of the different projects. So that way, you know, this virtual environment, and by building these inside the Conda module, I'm able to take advantage of all of the, you know, TensorFlow, PyTorch libraries in the Conda module, while maintaining, you know, explicit dependencies per project in this, you know, nested virtual environment.
I think what I meant is you use the one that's already pre-built, or
Yes,
you build it?
I help Kyle to build, like, so yeah, this they're one and the same in a sense.
Okay,
This is the one that me and
same
Kyle have
thing.
been working on building for a few weeks. So yeah, this is just me doing it now publicly for everybody to use and point out where it's broken. But no, yeah, so I used the publicly provided ones. Just because they should all work. Everything in them should work. If they don't, you send a letter to, or send a note to our support staff, because then it's, you know, useful for us to know as well. But unless you have some like very specific, unique dependency that you have to install specifically with Conda, I would generally advise to use virtual environments on top of that Conda and just leave Conda well enough below. Hopefully you should just be able to build on top of it and not have to like, because we get a lot of people who try to rebuild the Conda environment on their own and end up missing like, you know, they miss the CUDA libraries during linking, and then their PyTorch isn't, you know, GPU compatible. And then we spend time telling them, you know, trying to tell them that to just use our publicly available one. And, you know, and it's also the whole Python packaging process is a mess and can be very problematic. And so trying to remove any additional friction from that wherever possible is what I'm all about. Does that make sense? Can I answer it?
So is it optimized for Polaris?
So but do we optimize for Polaris?
Seems like, is it like you're compiling all these there?
Yeah. So all of the so this is just in the base Conda environment, right? And so there's this deep speed has this functionality. You can call this deep speed report. And hopefully it will be mostly green, telling you that it's built all of these optimized, you know, fused kernels and should be ready to go.
Also, like Honda just gives you a binary.
Yeah, it's not there are advantages and disadvantages to doing it in this way. Yeah, that's, you know, yeah, that's again getting above my pay grade sort of decisions on that. But you know, it seems to work well enough. But again, if people try it and run into issues, that's useful for us to know as well. So yeah, so as I was saying that, you know, in this case, you can see all of like the deep speed, you know, all these various fused kernels are okay, except the sparse attention, which we know about. Ignore that.
And we should do this on the interactive.
Yes, so this, yes. Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's another, actually pretty common point, is people, and I've done it too. I'll like think I'm running in a session and like, go to launch a script and then it fails and I'm like very confused for like 10 seconds to why it failed, and because was running it on a login node. So that's always maybe the first thing to check whenever you run into problems. Make sure that things are executing where you expect them to be. And a lot of problems actually can get solved just by, looking at things like that. But yeah, if you can get a job through now, otherwise you're obviously welcome to just like follow along. Yeah, any other questions about any of that? Love talking about Python packaging, so let me have it, honestly. Okay, then getting back to it. So we're still in this Conda environment and we still need to source this. Yeah, that's where I went off on the tangent because I was talking about Polaris. So now we are in this Python, this virtual environment. That's good. So these next two lines, so this IBV fork safe specifically, is I'm not going to it's without it, the things will seemingly get hung. Kind of, to what will appear to you to be randomly, which makes it hard when you're trying to debug it. But if you set this variable, it should work without issue. And yeah, that's.
The slides we have.
Yeah, and this is just pulling it from that. They're in the slides channel. Again, yeah, so that is something that we just have to work around for the moment, and is something we kind of know about and is a pain. And this additional CUDA device max connections, just another environment variable that eventually will go away, but in the meantime is there until we figure out what these issues are. And so after that, you are more or less set up to run. So how you go about actually like launching the training is, so the system, I'll be real honest with you, it's not a great system. If I would have been writing it myself, this is not how I would have designed things, but I kind of jumped into this project after it was way too late for me to have a say in how that's done. And so I've kind of been forced to work within their constraints a bit. And so the mechanism by which you change settings for an experiment is basically by setting them in your environment prior to launching. So for example, if you want to try a different model size in this, okay, maybe just take a step back. In this ALCF directory, there are all these shell scripts that hopefully should be somewhat self-explanatory. So this args is kind of the main argument script. And so if you look through here, you can see like, sequence length, it'll parse it from the environment. If it's not set in the environment, it'll default to like 2048, which, as definitely isn't ideal, but works well enough for the time being. And so there's a bunch of different arguments in here specifically that you can change and kind of see how they're defined and what they do. And these are mostly runtime arguments, so things like sequence parallelism type, batch sizes, sequence length, so on and so on, path the data set, so on. The different possible model architectures that you can try are obviously then in this ALCF model.sh. And you can see that there's basically any of these that are defined in here, you can use and try out if you don't run out of memory. So for example, you can launch like this 13 billion parameter model. Keep things simple. Sequence length 1024 microbatch. That's not important. So set the environment variable that you want to use for your run. Model size, sequence length, microbatch, etc. And if everything works, you should just be able to launch, execute that ALCF train GPT 3.sh. And so as you can see, it like prints out a whole bunch of, stuff that is useful for me. And then at the end here, it'll print out this bit about like writing logs to yada yada. To view the output of the run, tail this or like watch that log file. So do that. No, so this is actually just it just auto completes it from my like history actually, which is pretty convenient. I think it's just this like CSH auto suggestion. Anybody uses Z shell and is curious. I also love talking about Python packaging and love talking about like colors and customizing your environment. So that, anytime would be happy to talk about Z shell plugins for sure. Yeah. Also, any other question about any of that too? Seriously, I'm happy to talk about. But yeah, so that just is like pulling from. That's just trying to suggest things from my history that I've ran before. But yeah. So, so it does a lot more than that. One of the nice things is that it's so POSIX compliant, so it's completely backwards compatible with Bash shell. And so it really kind of gives you, all of these additional features and things while also maintaining, everything. Yes. But with that, there's also a lot more, subtleties and details and things. But that was just kind of what I used when I very first started programming and stuff, and so I've always used it since then. But I have ran into issues actually, on a new system trying to, their scripts really aren't expecting you to run Z shell or, different things. And so something to be aware of if you do decide to use it. It can definitely cause problems that you end up spending more time on them than you'd like to. And that you probably wouldn't have if you just been using Bash, but it's worth it sometimes.
So are you using Z shell both locally and on the node compute?
Yeah, so
for the logins as well?
Yeah, there's in the ALCF account ALCF.ALCF account ALCF.anl.gov. I think there's an option in there somewhere to specify your login shell. So yeah, you're free to change it if you want, but it's kind of at your own, at your own risk type situation. But we have pretty good support, I think. So another Kyle, the other person I build the Conda environments with, also uses Z shell, so we hopefully should have pretty good coverage. But yeah, anyway, so we launched this run. You can see it says it's running on 2 hosts. Some additional information, and then you can watch the output by looking at that log file. And so you can see, I've seen this a lot, so it's not interesting to me, but maybe to you guys it is. That's all just previous information. It prints out like the full list of arguments they could pass in. So this is the full command. So you can see it launches this MPI exec, and forward all of the environments forward all of the variables in my environment to all of the compute nodes, verbose, so I don't lose my mind debugging. Specify the path to the host file, which this is just your PBS node file, total number of GPUs per node, the explicit path to the Python executable, that pre-trained GPT that we launch, and then the rest of these command line arguments. Then it tells you about where it's printing the logs to. Then it tells you that deep speed is setting the deep speed accelerator to CUDA. That's a good sign. And then it goes on to print, it does this nicely formatted printing of all of the environments that it received. Here's, just additional check that it's actually getting initialized on all of the ranks. Goes through it checks and see if these fused kernels are already built. In this case, they were, so it'll just load them. If they weren't, and this was the first time you were running it, it would then try to build them. Which if it fails, then it fails, and then that's a problem. And it was something I was working through last night. So these things happen. Hopefully they won't now in this repo, but before I had it set up, they were for them to happen. And then so some more information about, how many parameters on different tensor and pipeline parallel ranks. Deep speed as an internal sanity check, gives you this, deep speed report as well. Total number of parameters, and then pretty much launches into the training. So I guess it goes through some more configuration information, a lot more than I was remembered. Oh, see out of memory, classic. So yeah, that's something that happens a lot. I thought I'd ran with this before and not used, but okay, let's just try a smaller model, right? So I think there's this like 2.7 billion.
Training model or yeah?
Yeah, this would be completely randomly, and starting from the very beginning, randomly initialized model, training it with whatever data set you have. And so yeah, this is what then Meta would let run for 6 months or whatever to.
What's your data?
So this is actually just using like a synthetic. So this is using a very small copy of an data set that's now been taken offline. That we have just been using internally for benchmarking and things, but we don't have at the moment a yeah, this is just synthetic, can be really just synthetic data for the purposes of this workshop and training.
Can be, but what is it?
Oh,
You don't want to.
well, so this is really just random text. This one is not. Yeah, this is really just for the purposes of getting it working.
Okay.
But so that's something we're kind of currently working on and thinking about, is having a way to host publicly available data sets that would be publicly available that people could use for training and things. But yeah, uses this old corpus data set that actually has since been taken offline and isn't really it's kind of ongoing. It's something we need to figure out. So the data is one kind of that we're still working on figuring out. Yeah, any other questions? Hopefully this now didn't crash without a memory. Yeah.
Recently didn't receive the invitation to a Slack channel and nothing, so I have been kind of distracted, but can you send me I don't know where is the tutorial to
Sure.
go to step
Sure.
by step. I'll try to do that after this.
I'll send you an email.
what's-
the email.
Yeah, but I never received it. I didn't realize I have to do all of this yesterday.
Sure, what's the,
I can try to forward it to you.
oh, perfect,
You didn't either, well, anyway.
Can I get your email address?
sure,
Yes,
yeah.
I will do that.
Would you do the parameters you changed to get over the memory?
Yes, so I had originally submitted it with 13 billion parameter model, and that was giving me out of memory, so I switched it to, I tried using a smaller model, this 2.7 billion parameter.
Yes, I have it.
I'm assuming I got this
Yeah, it's otherwise identical, just fewer, smaller transformer layers with fewer, hidden units. So batch size and things, so again, because of how all of this is set up, if you don't specify any one of these any one of the options that it will need to run, it'll basically parse this args.sh and find the default value. And I don't actually know what the default value is set as for this micro batch size.
Everything is step.
Okay, yeah, so that was kind of what I figured. If you don't specify it, it'll just automatically default to micro batch 1. But then you can obviously then you could override that though, if you were to want to. by another time.
Because eventually slides will.
Stop using fish.
What's up? No, I swear this is Z shell. We actually we're just getting into it about the Z shell plugins, etc. And I said, hopefully we should have pretty good coverage because me and Kyle both use Z shell, so. But it's also caused me issues before as well. So it's user beware type of situation. And yeah, so that was really all I was saying is that, and this, so there's also kind of, on my long list of things to do, would be to rewrite all of this. Because really how all this works, it parses all of these variables, so on, so on. And then it needs to do two things, build this deep speed config, which deep speed will be looking for that in the form of a JSON file. And so there's this kind of, hacky method in here that finds the variable set in the shell script and then writes it out to a JSON file, which isn't, a great way of doing it. So you need to build that the deep speed config.json and build up this list of GPT arguments. And that's really all that all of this does is, all this complicated logic just to build this long string of options. And so, yeah, if I had, more time, I would probably rewrite this and simplify all of that. But for the moment, it is what it is. So then, yeah, hopefully this smaller model didn't run out of memory. And it looks like it did work. Yep. So then you can see, you made it to the, making progress when you see these iteration counts. So 1, I think after the first step, there's this option here to do. So it'll automatically run this flux profiler after the first step. So that's what this is. And you can see it prints some information about the world size, different parallelism settings, batch size for GPU, so on and so on. Some information about the model. Different, throughput measurements at different layers. And then, goes on with the rest of the training. So then go on, step 2, 3, 4, and so on. And this, will then continue for the total number of training iterations you specify, and then exit out. And then that should be it. No more, I don't have any API steps running, and then it finishes. And so you can change the number of training steps as just, and here's some more, I think, train iters, train iterations, evaluations. And so if you were to want to build your own GPT-5, this would really be where you would have a much better data set. And then, you would launch this, figure out a good model architecture you want to use, parallelism strategies, how many GPUs you're going to need. And then, let it run, set it, launch it up, have somebody watch it for the next 6 months. And hope that your GPUs don't go down too frequently. What I understand, at least. So if you don't, so that's another, so kind of as so this current iteration of this Argonne Megatron Deep Speed has been part of, this is like the now, I would say, most publicly available, public facing version of it that, yes, before we got to this point, there were many different, in my personal GitHub, Megatron Deep Speed, benchmarking 1 repos that were iterations on this process we've been working through with the Deep Speed team. And so through all of that, we've been focusing specifically on this sequence parallelism, which I didn't talk about in the talk, and is kind of a new feature in NVIDIA's Megatron that Deep Speed wanted to get implemented in their public repo. And so we've been working with them to get that implemented. And so if you don't specify parallelism at the moment, it will default to trying to use this sequence parallel implementation just simply as an artifact of this work that we've been doing before. Sequence parallelism, you completely don't need to. But if you see it, so just I was trying to give a bit of context. If you see it in here and are wondering, why, because I think it also is pretty explicit in the logs, using sequence parallelism from yada yada, and that's just because we were working it out and using it internally. But in the default case, I really should modify all of this so that there's no, if you don't specify it by default, it shouldn't use any. It would be just default data parallelism without zero offloading. I don't think at the moment that's true. I think if you don't specify, it'll automatically use this sequence parallelism, which is in there kind of temporarily. But in the you should think of it as being, if you don't specify anything, it will just run no zero offloading with normal data parallel like you would in DDP. But yeah, so if people go are looking around in here, I'm sure there would be a lot more questions than there are currently. But yeah, that's another very good question. Anything else? Was anybody else like able to get it working or try it?
I keep getting memory issues. I went down to 1 billion.
How many nodes are you on?
I guess I'm on one node actually.
So another thing in all of this is that you get more GPU, you get more available memory for free just by using more GPUs.
Okay.
And so you can automatically fit larger models, if you have some model size that doesn't fit on one node, you get, I don't know, what are they on Polaris? 40 gigs? So you get an extra 40 gigs of memory just by you pulling in another GPU. And so if it doesn't fit on a single node, try on two. There are also some heuristics for trying to roughly estimate I don't know off the top of my head, so I'll leave it at that.
That all implemented in the code there, or is it like used to be handling it?
So which part of it?
You automatic, like if you have more GPUs.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a combination. Really all it does in here is in this setup.sh, there's some logic that basically it will, it does some like host name check basically. So if, really at the highest level, if your host name starts with data, it'll look for this Cobalt node file in your environment. If so, it will figure out the total number of nodes in your current job by just counting the lines in that, then figuring out how many GPUs per each of those nodes, and then finding the total number of GPUs. And then has some, logic for specifying like what you would use to build the MPI command, using just basically the minimal set of defaults that you need to launch it. And so it will automatically, if you're on Polaris or Theta GPU or Perlmutter now, it should determine all of that automatically. So this is for the sake of building the MPI exec command. But then there's another kind of subtle issue related to the, so you can launch your, if you launch MPI exec Python, whatever application, you still need that Python process still needs to, they need to talk to each other, like your external MPI command that launches the Python, and then your Python that gets launched into needs, a mechanism for figuring out what's in your environment and, what that MPI exec command actually launched. And that's kind of where this, and also methods for specifying like the back end, for example, in PyTorch, if you're using DDP or DeepSpeed, because they have to be, the distributed initialization has to be done a bit differently. And so that's kind of to, abstract a bit of that away as much as possible. Is why I started, it's kind of where this came out of, this library I've been working on. And so the idea being that, on any of these systems, so like any of the ALCF systems or now Perlmutter as well, if you, in your application, if you just include this, from easy peasy setup Torch or setup TensorFlow and put that at the top level of your application, then you don't have to worry at all about any more distributed communication or initialization or anything. And so that's what I've actually moved to in this Megatron Deep Speed. So if you look at the this pre-train GPT.py, at the very top level, it calls this setup Torch with Deep Speed backend. This function returns the rank of the GPU that this is running on currently. And there are other functions in there, like, get world size, a couple other ones. But if you put this at the top level, then all of your, initialization, synchronization stuff is kind of taken care of, and you get a nice, automatically get the rank that you're on as well for free. So that's kind of it's a work in progress, and ideally, I would like to abstract away this need to like, currently the host file is determined in bash before you launch, but there's no reason that I couldn't figure that environment variable out from Python, the running Python process. So ideally, I would like to even take it a step further and just you launch it through Python and it automatically takes care of it. But that's kind of down the road. Yeah,
You, for those of us who are behind.
yes, please.
I've been in the Slack channel, the commands
To
that
run,
we
sure.
use to run, get to that point, so obviously can't, like modulo.
Sure,
and
sure.
activate.
Is there like a,
You shared in the Slack channel.
There is a panel called AI.
test bed breakout? No.
No.
ML breakout. Wow, not even mention. Yes. Yeah, so this is really the, so here, I'm maybe from. It's tough, right? It's completely obvious and makes sense to me, but I know that that's not always the case, so. So yeah, these first few, I just broke this string up because it was too long to fit on my slide. It was really the only reason, that's why it's looks so long like that. Yeah, right, if I had it, if I had this workshop directory all as one line, it ran out there, so I just broke it up into multiple lines. So I broke it up into, these directories. But these first few lines are just getting into this Argon LCF Megatron deep speed. And so, yeah, this is just getting into that directory. And then this just on Polaris loads the most recent Conda module, this 10-04. I always put these two commands on a single line, the module load Conda and Conda activate base, because I find if I don't, then I'll load the Conda module, but never activate the base environment. And then, yeah, it's happened one too many times that I've just, do this now. Once you're in this, base Conda module, then activate the virtual environment in that Megatron deep speed directory. And so again, for sanity's sake, I name them by like machine and Conda environment. And yeah, just activate that. These environment variables are, yeah, I don't know how else to say it. They're a pain, but we need to set them until we get these kind of issues resolved. So if you happen to notice that you're running and things are just completely hung and you don't know why, it could be that you might have forgot to set one of these. So double check. And then after that is just specifying the variables that you want to use for your experiment or for your run. So you can either, do them one at a time, variable by variable, and then launch your command separately. I usually, again, just keep my, try to keep my sanity. I'll usually do it all in one. So specify them on the same line that I launched the thing in. You also need to be careful. So that's how you specify different options. And so this, for example, uses the sequence length, microbatch size. This is the model architecture size. And this probably get rid of because sequence parallelism isn't curriculum for the whoa.
Model size, that's.
So this model size key is that there are in this ALCF directory, there's this model.sh file, and it has all of these different so these are just like examples that I didn't come up with them. These are just, I guess, like common, configurations for different model sizes, specified by using different numbers of layers, different number of nodes per hidden layer, and different numbers of attention heads. And so by, some combination of those three, you end up with a total number of parameters. And these are just different, model architectures you can try. It's, non-exhaustive, you can add more, try more if you want, these are just some of like the more common ones. And so whatever these model XX key is in here would be what you would want to specify as your model size key here. And then it has some internal logic for like, picking those up from the environment and setting them in a, kind of complicated manner, but that's how it works. That make sense?
Sorry to,
Yeah, please.
right, so I understand you have code set up that have the number of ranks available and find that. But like, you can choose different model architectures, like, you still have to make decisions about how to split the model.
Yes,
And then
right.
which ones compete with each other, and it could be any architecture, so like I said, that's why I'm not super.
Right, so then that gets into this idea of different parallelism techniques. So in the case where you're not using any, where you're only using like the data parallelism, then in that case, there's no none of the GPUs need to talk to each other. They only, need to have some, global averaging and broadcasting. And so as long as you're in this data parallel case, then you can just assume you launch identical copies. By default, it'll just try to use all of the available GPUs and just put identical copies of the model on each of them and do it with this data parallel. And so in that case, you don't have to worry about any of this like inter GPU communication. But if that's, if your model is too big and you can't just use naive data parallelism, then you have to resort to either zero offloading or some parallelism technique. And that is all handled by a combination of Megatron deep speed. So Megatron deep speed has some kind of wrappers on top of the native deep speed implementations. So deep speed native supports zero offloading and is increasingly supporting more different types of parallelism strategies. But for this Megatron deep speed, it would depend. Yeah, it's a kind of a mix between the two, and would depend on like which parallelism strategy you're using.
Is that going on here, or is this the thing?
No, that is all handled like in the internally. So you specify as you're going to launch everything, you have your model architecture and then you specify. So for example, you can specify like the pipeline parallel size. I would have imagined these would all be grouped, but they're not. They were at one point. That's where it breaks up. So you can specify the pipeline parallel size. I'm not going to talk about, but the sequence parallelism as well. And sequence pipeline, tensor, and data parallelism. So you specify at run, I specify I want to use model architecture, and then I can specify, for example, like, pipeline size, pipeline parallel size 2, for example. And then I just tell, I specify that as an argument. And then deep speed internally will figure out, okay, you have 4 GPUs, you want, pipeline state of 2. How do I divide the model up between these GPUs? And so that all is taking care of everything for you, as long as you specify the parallelism setting sizes that you want when you run. Oh yeah, long-winded way of saying no. You don't have to worry about it. But I'm guessing that people are probably somewhat interested in how it works or what's going on behind the scenes. So also, when your code doesn't work, I feel like it's useful to have some sort of idea what's going on. Otherwise, you'll never make code debugging that. Yeah. Any other?
You wanted to run DNN.
Yeah. So that's so that's actually part of all of this. So a big part of this effort has been in collaboration with the Microsoft Deep Speed team. And what we were doing specifically was trying, so this GenSLM model, which I'm sure a couple other people have talked about. Yeah, their site seems to be down today. For some reason.
Not DNA. right?
No, so it's a bit, no, I think oh, yours is not DNA.
That one is protein, so I thought it was amino acid.
I'm not a biologist. It's now I'm not sure. But yes, if you have any sort of data that can be represented as a string of text, should work with this. There with the caveat being that the tokenizer and data loading process logic that Megatron uses, it can be a bit. We've had trouble with it. So as we were trying to use this Megatron deep speed for this GenSLM model, trying to take an existing data set that we had as, whatever JSON, H5 files, whatever they may be, and getting those into a format that worked well with the Megatron tokenizer and preprocessing logic was a bit of a struggle. And I didn't do it personally, but we have Aruni and I think Kyle were the ones who did it and definitely had a bit of trouble with it. But as I was saying earlier about these data sets, it's something that we're like, the deep speed team's also aware of it and they're trying to figure out a better way of doing it. So I would say maybe stay tuned. I wouldn't devote, a bunch of time now, because I would say in the pretty near future, there should be some tools that'll make it a bit simpler. And if there, you have a pressing need case, you need to get this data in here by like next week, let me know, we can figure something out, but that's kind of how I see things. It's definitely ongoing, and that's one of the major, I would say, challenges at the moment for all of these frameworks is having efficient and safe data input pipelines. And getting it to work with English text is a very active kind of thing.
Needs to take the laptop.
So when you load, when you do the module load conduct, 2023 and that environment, does it have touch?
Does it have torch, deep speed?
Right,
Is that take better?
right?
Oh, no.
So automate the touch. Potentially tells me that there is no module named.
Did you conda activate?
He is the resident,
Oh,
honestly.
Okay, so.
Load the module.
For as much as I love talking about Python packaging, he is the one I
think
so.
that's something.
It really works if you see two, you at least two GPUs, or one to fit that.
Oh, good.
It doesn't work with one.
Good.
But I activated.
Or at least two nodes, sorry.
Yeah, right,
At least
right,
two
right.
nodes.
Virtual.
Yeah, but
environment.
Also, how do you, these work?
How do you make your
Right,
business?
so I'm
Do
going
you
to-
use PowerPoint?
So I know I use
This is great.
it's actually, so there's this document processing software called Porto, which is built on top of this other document formatting thing called Pandoc, which is it's just yes, and so there's just used to convert it back and forth between formats. And so Porto is kind of different in that it is like designed to be interactive and lets you embed. It's kind of like a web version of a Jupyter notebook is how I think about it. And importantly, it lets you go between like a Jupyter notebook and Reveal JS slide framework. So there's
Like Markdown.
so you write it, it's all written in Markdown. So like these are
Yeah, you're right.
here, I'll pull up what it looks like.
Yeah, well, so let me verify.
And so it's technically like, it's called like the extension is QMD. It's like a superset of normal Markdown, but it's compatible with like the Pandoc syntax. So you can, do things like, group things with these like, triple dots. And it doesn't really look, I mean, it's based on the Markdown syntax. Looking at it naively, it doesn't really look like Markdown. But that's just because I have all these like, wrappers and layout little things in here. But yeah, I just, write it in Markdown and then,
This is a problem where it's
No.
like,
and, like,
this is, I don't know when you.
No, it's really good.
yeah, launch it and build it. Thank you. Thank you.
It's like a while.
Yes, it's definitely been an ongoing, iterative. Yeah, my slide from 4 years ago did not look as nice. But it's, yeah, I also, the more I've worked with it, the more I've found it to be convenient. And so it's also nice, you can also not only build slides, but you can like, recently I helped do this like climate analysis project. You can write it in Markdown and deploy it to like a static website with GitHub pages.
Yeah, I saw you, everything's connected to you.
And it's pretty nice because then you can, write it all as a Jupyter notebook and it'll run these cells and then, apply all your formatting and so on. So it's pretty nice. I like it.
It's all with
Yes, but then at your own expense. Yeah, that's been a lot of late nights, like, last night trying to figure out why, yeah, this box is like off center or something, and I'm like, my slides aren't even done. I need to, where are they? Yes, yeah, so before I blindly advocate people.
That
yeah.
is all with Quarto and then those other like with.
Yeah, it's pretty, and it's unless, to get started without like customizing things and stuff, it's pretty straightforward to get, use their like, default templates and get it started. But if you really want, getting into the details of things, there's a lot to do.
Yeah, sure.
And for our people, it was a natural transition, but I'm surprised you are using it.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of all really born out of this, like, so for a while I would write, there's also there are a lot of like Markdown wrappers that like allow you to reveal JavaScript in Markdown, and then it'll like, you run it as a command line application, and it'll output it as an HTML file. And so I was doing that for a while, but that's not great. And Quarto kind of helped to bridge, once I like realized Quarto could help bridge that gap, I was like, oh, this is much simpler. And yeah, I'm a big fan. This has all been like last 6 months or so I'm very much like figuring it out myself too.
And I know that's your website.
Yeah, just recently. So what's funny, actually, my personal website used to be, it was like Hugo is another like static site framework. And like very, very just recently, switched it from Hugo to Quarto. Yeah, and tweeted it the other day, actually, yeah. Wow.
Actually, I don't know.
Yeah.
where it is and what it's using. It's just in GitHub one.
What extension am I using for my path on the command line? Oh, so it's not like, you mean how it's like cut off, it's not like yes, yes, I don't, so I use this, it's P10K, it's like power level 10K C shell.
Actually, I remember it.
And yeah, I think most of the settings are actually default. If you like install it as a Z shell plugin, I think you can just do like P10K configure, or like walk you through a bunch of different options and stuff. And I don't know what I've modified specifically in those settings though, but it's all built in. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, it's great, yeah, it's, when I'm like watching other people give talks or like do things interactively, and I like see them using Z shell or something else that I use.
Back to the.
You should add all of your like.
I should, I've thought about it before. It used to have them all my like that files pretty well organized. And then that got broken at some point, and then I just haven't gotten back to it. I also promised people on Twitter like 2 months ago, I like promised on Twitter like 2 months ago that I would write up a blog about like how I make my slides actually. And that was like back in August, and the guilt just, weighs on me every day that I haven't written it up. It's like actually up kind of, but it's empty. So, yes, the more I have people think that it would be useful, the more likely I am to do it too. If I think it's not just for my own benefit, then that's another reason I want to do it. So yeah, maybe I will.
All these lines, yeah, they will run.
The search option is very nice.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, this is
So it's basically just-
yeah, another question I get a lot too is what browser is that? Yeah, so this is like,
Beyond
it's
that,
called
if you
Arc.
want to customize
It's
it,
like a new and basic, it's like a really Chrome behind the scenes, but it's a little bit different. It's got like a sidebar and stuff like that. And there's like, some nice, kind of nice stuff in it. I used to be like invite only, but I think it's public now. But if it's still invite only and anybody wants to try it, I can send it an invite. Yes, so it's a work in progress. But it's getting there. It's just literally just and then I was like, oh, because this was where, said I would do it, and then these are the slides, and then I was like, oh, instead of actually writing the blog, let's abstract all of these styles into a template that I've since abandoned, and so that's about how far that's gone. But yeah, I've learned a lot from doing it, especially like things that I would have probably otherwise not seen as much. So one of those things, I guess. Any other? Not to, I could keep talking about, Markdown and Z plugins, but people want to try, we're here for the student training, so if people want to talk about that, that will get priority. Yeah.
You're saying this is not gonna work for.
No, the instructions for this workshop will definitely work. And as long as this workshop project space is available, this set of commands should still work. Going forward, it'll change how, like, the instructions for how you would do this in the future will change maybe a bit. And ideally for the better, right? It would ideally in a way that would involve you having to do less steps. But for now, I'd say it should work. If anything changes or breaks, or you try and it doesn't, or you want to try running it a different way, because it's really not great how it is running with everybody running it in the same directory in a shared file space. And as long as not all of us do it at the same time, hopefully it'll be okay. But there's, it should also be straightforward for you or anyone to install it into your, your own project directory and replicate those series of instructions on your own,
Yes.
personal private copy of it.
Yes.
I mean, if I want to.
No, I mean,
I was just saying, if all of us are in, oh, not that.
I was saying a DNA.
Yes, right. The data, so the part of the issue at the moment is,
Using this.
so how is, do you have the data already? Sure. Do you have so part of the issue that we're running into, is taking the data from some existing, I don't even know what format it was in originally, to be totally honest with you. But to be compatible with the Megatron deep speed, it needs to, you need to convert your existing data into a bin and an index file. That the details of which I'm, again, really not completely clear on. But if you say, for example, had a huge JSON file or a series of JSON files, you need to do some work to aggregate that somehow into these bit.bin and .index files that Megatron then sequentially parses and writes out to NumPy files that it then reads in for training. So I'm not really terribly clear or familiar with all of the pre-processing and Megatron tokenizing specific logic and how that all works. But I know that there was the little bit we did was kind of a pain. And it's something we need to go back. No, so GenSLM was originally trained with GPT Neo X in the release that and what was published in SC and what we did for that paper. But the part of the issue is that, well, so part of what they want to do is really scale up the sequence length so they can scale to more complicated genomes, essentially, because the COVID-19 genome is relatively small and it's pretty small comparatively. But then if they were to try to scale that up like E. coli, there are no existing language model training frameworks that would even, they would come close to being able to fitting, 200K sequence length in pre-training. And so that was what kind of motivated and inspired this like collaboration with DeepSpeed. They were like, we want to help you try to, get as long sequence lengths as possible. For this purpose. And so we've been working on getting that functionality added and working, and now need to come back to how we'll actually use that, given that it's hard to process the data and all of that. So we've been working with them to like scale up this sequence length, which we've gotten pretty good success on. So we've gotten up to like, these were from the backup slide.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's still not right.
I use this one for.
Even with like the current up-to-date NVIDIA Megatron, which is like pretty widely considered to be like the most feature complete large language model training library. So going like for this, I think it's 25 billion parameter model. NVIDIA's implementation runs out of memory at like 8K sequence length. And this is, for a fixed number of GPUs, they, run out of memory at about 8K sequence length. And then looking at this a bit larger, so scaling that up across multiple GPUs. We're at, like pretty significantly, so like order of 10x or so longer. For the same, everything else being equal, just swapping out NVIDIA's Megatron for this new Microsoft Megatron Deep Speed release. We can get to almost, while remaining performant at least order of 10 times larger sequences. Yeah, so the largest I think we've been able to get up to is like going from, NVIDIA's Megatron is like say so like 52,000 on 128 GPUs up to like 512,000. 500K versus like 50K on that level, before this release.
It works with 500K length, but then you need to pre-process your.
Yes, but that's assuming that we can get this, these sequences loaded in and working, which is kind of where things are.
So I would again
Okay.
tear it down.
And so it works. It works. It works. It's just a matter of having so now we need to make a data set that the actual bio data set that'll work with it. So we just have these like random text data sets, very small subsets, which it works and like for the purposes of profiling, benchmarking, all works and like because we've tested on. But now to actually part of what we've been stuck on is measuring how this improves performance on downstream tasks. And so we would imagine that having longer sequence lengths should, allow for, modeling across more context awareness across the genome. And so you would have their team has all these downstream tasks that should hope to measure that.
So that's okay.
But in order to measure that, we need to train it on a realistic data set. Before we would, see how it would actually
Okay,
perform.
so
We need, that's kind of
where's your,
where things are and how.
Oh, here it is.
And very much, all very, very much ongoing. So this is the public release was 9/20 or something. Within the last 8 weeks.
Yeah, I'll eat.
So the science is Arvind and Kyle. I would say Arvind obviously, but then Kyle Hippie is Kyle and Alex Brace. They're in Arvind's lab. They are much more on the science. And I, not being a biologist, I'm much less. Yeah.
So just to be comparison, this is what it should look like, right? Like that's.
Yes, yeah, sure, yes. Sure, please. I see, so I think you can,
I mean, I got it to work, it's work around it. And data
I
cache
see, I
path-
see.
Data cache path, the
Oh, no,
default
yeah,
part
so
is
that
going
is-
to
there's
school.
Anyway,
Oh, yeah, Kyle brought that up earlier actually too, and yeah.
Okay, okay, just wanna make
Yeah,
sure.
no, that's something I'd see, like, had been, yeah, probably aware of this data cache path issue too.
Is it actually causing an issue?
Yeah, it crashed, and then I went to check what it is, it's just not readable, basically, is my guess.
Yeah,
And
It's trying to read my cache or.
Yeah,
yours.
or which, whoever's was the last person who ran it.
See, okay, but that's a trivial fix. You should just be able to put the, in the config, right? Like.
Yes,
the
yeah,
data
yeah,
cache,
yes,
Like
yeah,
set it
yeah.
home or something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good,
you
no,
did-
but
you did,
I do,
right,
I do
Yeah,
appreciate
I
it,
saw, I got that earlier.
because otherwise, yeah, exactly, because then otherwise, you know,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Okay, good. Awesome, do you have one?
Yes, yeah, I think so, I think,
Yeah, feel free to put like.
yeah.
How do I know? that
Hey.
The.
Oh, I just replied to you because I had to check, you didn't respond 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I would,
Um,
so the only, so, so it used to be, there were a few Python libraries that were like,
The new environment.
that seem to only be installable with Conda. So I think if you were to try like
What's that?
install,
You
I
just
think you can
realized.
install.
Yeah, I haven't
I think
announced it,
they're
it was
installed,
like you're making up
Their
until,
recommended
you know,
install.
a week ago, right, before, so, there's some things that still testing. It's,
Yes,
I didn't hide it anymore, but like, I announced it, and I'm not ready to answer a bunch of tickets because
Environment
I
browser.
can find some things broken, but I think like maybe next week I'll announce.
At the same time, and we want to try and think, from these paper hardware, never had.
Yeah, that, so not,
You, I know it's
you know,
not-
and not, so I know not in a, I don't, it's better, I would say it's probably been a while, like, since it's been like. Again, so Kyle would definitely know much better. I know that's been like an issue that we've, hit trouble with, and it's like definitely still on. We're trying to, figure it out for sure.
So, yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is just use engaging.
Right.
Solar suite.
I think
Okay.
you're right,
And
like
then
a small
scale
time
up
ago.
on
But it's the
Arc,
same
and then
launcher,
the-
right? It's the same.
The other
command
part of
line.
it is gonna be Perl.
Oh, you already have
Your-
to
I mean,
use.
Yes.
okay, pipeline.
So that's the
You have
issue
this
with
kind of
using,
thing
yeah.
that is like
Yeah,
very-
that's.
I see, you can't use MPI runs.
Right.
Okay, but yeah, no, I mean, I
But it's
need to
got
file a
different
ticket.
paths,
I think I have it. See, the years I've got this saved, like I was looking around to see if other people raise this.
We talk to the two people, we can separate them out.
Like,
but we have
see
to
how they
optimize
fixed
both.
it. But it's certainly a bug,
But
because,
then
they
treat
make
those sort of
assumptions
like
about how,
models, and that's just-
MPI runs.
Right, yeah.
And so anyways, the parallelism we talked about.
Yeah.
Plenty of uses.
No, that was,
Yeah.
exactly what,
I know
yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind. So we're actually, yeah, so things like this are, I'm sure you know, like becoming increasingly common.
Yeah.
And trying to, and at the moment, it also seems like,
2022.
yeah, people have their own methods for doing it, or like,
Yeah.
they were introduced to doing it this way, and so that's how they do it, and there are all these different ways of doing it and orchestrating it. And
Okay, so like, that's like, the way when you try to work on run, it just says
I can
something
always
shell
talk
lookup.
about it, but the thing that I wanted
To see if it assumes MPI runs like in a couple of locations where it normally is.
yeah,
We-
And
we're
it's not because it's controlled by the logic system. You know, Cray injects like when you want layers, it's like.
yes, yeah, you don't want, you're not gonna, yes, you spend all, waste all your time,
So-
and that's
so,
the, in a job that's just trying to parse,
Yeah.
it's running Conda solve,
Yeah, so I really, I don't know a good strategy to do a bill that isn't so Frankenstein.
Yeah,
that
see,
only
it
one
did the
guy
same
knows
thing,
how to
like
do it.
it-
That's where we are,
Are
you logged?
yeah,
Like, we can.
So it's-
another time, because like, that's my.
yeah,
Okay, so anyway, I need to file a ticket.
so,
Trivial to fix, like the workaround if you want it is,
so there are kind of two ways
not with Elastic though, you need it for Elastic, you need to use more.
So I would say, the easiest answer, so I'm guessing have you been working with like the older versions, or have you tried with this new 10.04 one on Polaris? So we like just on
Oh, not the
10.04.
10.04, we haven't tried this.
Okay, so easiest answer, best case scenario, I suggest you try this 10.04. You come back to me and say, hey, Sam, that fixed, wow, that's crazy. All of our problems are gone.
Right.
No problemo. Have a nice life. It probably won't, especially because I think there are known issues with deep hyper specifically and this, and they're related to Ray somehow.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and so that is probably what will happen, in which case, see, his ears perked up. Which will probably be the case, and so then that's an ongoing issue we have with
So
deep
here's something
hyper
you
that,
do.
I don't know what.
Workbot runs just a simple script.
Oh, okay.
So it looks like this.
So what functionality in deep hyper are you using, just the?
Yeah.
It's
It's a shell script, or it's a.
parameters within the models, and so let's say we.
So
have-
this is, you can't.
Say we have like four models.
Sure.
Three of them are bound at the same time,
Copy this
right,
out.
basically, and that environment's
So
quite
copy
Okay.
and that's its own issue.
Yep.
Which.
Yeah, yeah, another day.
But otherwise, the role is just like whatever you tweak there, whatever you tweak in the fourth model, and then even just like layers, layer size, layer depth, that kind of thing, and that's it, and that's basic stuff in that regard.
Fair. So do you use weights and biases? I'm guessing not if you set up your API.
I mean,
config.
not as much as I have, I mean, the problem with biases is that it's not, what happens. So just use your options, which means like, oh, I do this sector optimization,
Fair, fair.
problem. But if it's impossible, then I need like a good strategy, is a good strategy.
So, so they do actually have this, there's this, sweep functionality in weights and biases. That,
Okay, just direct back, like through an API.
yeah, so it's how it, you essentially just,
I thought that'd be as simple.
have the,
Yeah, put a slide.
I've done it in this like lattice code I worked on. And essentially, you do it is you, so I use this like, Hydra.
Oh, yeah, you guys use that.
Leverage, so yeah, I
Barely.
I know like Corey doesn't, some people do, and I try to whenever I'm making a new project, just because, you know, I personally like it. But it's, I find it to be useful and convenient, and so if you are using it, if you're using it, for also you don't need to be, you can use it, you can do these sweeps independence, but, so with Hydra, you put all of the different configurations in a folder. And then I make this, you can, for weights and biases specifically, you can make this like, you know, sweeps default.yaml file. And you can like, yeah, it'll, you know, anything, so like anything that's categorical, it'll obviously, you know, just choose between the two. Just create like float values, this will do a, you know, yeah, like on that open interval, on that real interval. If you give it like, this list of possibles, it'll again just choose between these. And then you can even just, you know, specify, then you can tell weights and biases specifically what, yes, exactly. This is like, you know, the environment you're running with, or like which Python, the program, running with, like the rest of the defaults, and then it will automatically have some internal mechanism for, it'll run one experiment, you know, update, yes, and then feed that in as the arguments here. And you can launch it all with like. So this is, yeah, this sweep file is specifically in my like, it's like Aldridge MC's like lattice library, library I work on. And then really, at the end of the day, where all of my code comes from, I do things in here, and then things work, I pull them out and do a different library. But this is like the, you know, playground, main playground for everything.
Okay.
And there's this like.
Okay, so weights and biases with a sweep should give it some.
This explains why.
And
You got-
yeah,
you got-
I,
you got open ended.
how it is ultimately like how it ends up working.
So great.
Give you some like, you know.
So it matches as best it can.
And yeah, so this is kind of like a, you know, maybe not too, you know, maybe a bit subtle or hidden. Yeah, it's not very well advertised, I would say, but I've used it before, and it,
So I think
for that, for like those purposes, exactly. You don't need to have distributed neural
And then read
architecture.
the Workbot from that.
You know, because Deep Hyper also has a lot of additional functionality. that-
Yeah, we don't need.
Yeah, and so if you really just need to, you know, compare these, you know, different options.
Cycle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, and so I've had pretty good success with this, and, you know, only all you need is weights and bias. Yeah, and they have this whole.
Yeah, it's okay. I think I just saw that.
So the way that Craig did it is a weird thing, so.
Yeah, and there's, I've used it,
It's an alias, whereas in other times it's a symbolic link, or maybe it is its own script, and so it types. Is binary. Executable. So when you go in with modular work, launch like a non-login, non-interactive shell like this, or this is just like a, it's not a login shell because it's, it launched from Win. Same thing as what's happening with Orabot is it's obviously it's not a login shell, it spawns a shell and then it's like, where is MPI? And so the way that it's been coded to is like, is, it just runs MPI run version. Not found, and then that's what happens. And so now it makes all that Orabot code to that. It would find it, and then it would work.
It's this fall workshop.
Well, no, you wanna do that.
There's like a fall workshop scaling,
Orabot run.
and I think there's like another one that's like single. Yeah. Fall WS. You can put two node, single queue.
Which is the fast, right? The fast.
There you go. Easy peasy. Yeah, single is all, it'll only get you one node, and then obviously for scaling.
Okay, and then on a deeper level here.
Sure.
I talked to Venkat and I'm trying to figure out. Which track.
Okay.
Good documentation.
Okay, sure.
So actually, if you want.
Sure.
It's not a high priority to be honest, but I can, I'll post something, but
It's like anchored down.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, so then he's not, you're doing that there, I'm wasting all their time. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, this is, like, he's been really, really good about it.
But you only so much, people only have so much bandwidth.
Right.
Yes.
And the truth is, I'm trying to figure out how we were gonna get a time person on that. But we're totally happy to try and get some time. If we can get some time, help us maintain this kind of stuff. I don't know how that works. This is like, this is my favorite.
Honestly, I'm not really, I don't really know either. Yeah, so like, Professor Aim Hockey, is also professor at the University of Chicago, and I'm her and her team on this. Which was the Insight hackathon a few months ago. And so we worked with them, and like, they had a great time, and it was, really helpful with helping them with all the problems. So, and then, when it's like, just like, he's like, oh yeah, absolutely, cause I also like, happy to collaborate and, seem to be helpful to people, and so I'm always happy to.
Yeah.
And but I don't know in terms of like, I'm always happy, help however, whenever I can, but I don't know how the because like you said, something like that, like, you would really want ideally, somebody that, dedicated time, and obviously I'm sure like whatever help would be useful, but really not, it's a much larger problem than
these days, it's all spells, everything right spell, having it written down.
To be honest, I don't know how any of that works, or like how that gets decided, and I just, at the end of the day, what Ben gets telling me to prioritize and work on is what I.
No, I just want, because this thing, I didn't know if you.
Obviously, you can't really.
Not like.
How to do your
Kernel,
like if you want.
I really don't know. I don't know how
That's possible.
It's the,
But it's nasty.
I'm sure at some point it's left up to you're free to spend time on whatever you think will be personally most beneficial, and then if you're wrong, you're not gonna get promoted, right? To some extent.
Every step,
But I
and then if
don't
it doesn't
know
work.
beyond like my,
Sometimes you don't get a set, it's not satisfying.
That's what I'm gonna work on today, how that gets decided, like how people.
So I mean, like, for right now, I just like, I think we might end up being a bit more into
please, yeah, honestly, sure, please, no, never about it.
The two pieces basically, and then I'll talk to Christine about the workflow situation.
Sure.
And then I already talked about an insight. Like last year, I didn't see that you were, like, it just makes sense. No, that's right. You weren't there.
Sure.
You were not supposed to be there now.
Sure.
No, I get the same
So
thing
I'm
on
gonna
my,
talk to
like,
my people, like, hey.
Sure.
Like seriously, think we're gonna try this solution and then get back to you.
Let me know.
Either way.
Yeah, best case, right? You're like, wow, all of our problems are gone, new environment and the waste of ice used to be. It's, easy peasy. But, yeah, that's,
if you wanted to.
No, no, it sounds cool from there.
yeah, definitely.
If you wanted to see your next step, right?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's it's crazy too, like,
Big detail either way.
it's learning to be more, like, trusting my intuitions more, and like, they spend a lot of time, especially coming out of grad school, like, especially with people who've done it their whole lives or whatever, like, I just wouldn't put theirs, how they've tried all these other ways, however their way of doing it works, and that's the best way, and it's just the way it is, and as I've kind of, especially since like moving to staff here, I've gotten to,
I've used it.
imposter syndrome, something that everybody actually deals with, but like, just being, like, willing to be wrong publicly. And it's one of those things, Yes, and exactly, I'm much less, not afraid to ask a dumb question, and it's I appreciate it. I do appreciate
No,
it.
really. I mean, that's the thing, RC, like, we try to keep it to romaine, but the problem is it's not romaine.
Yes, of course.
And that's the thing. It's too bad that we have to general. Wasn't as specialized, I think we'd have easier figuring out like.
Right, but since it's, like you said, so.
But we are starting to get potentially a Attorney Mellon and our co-investigators out of Stanford, there's beach people, so like. I'm hoping that it gets above and it's.
Maybe somebody will have some, insight or, I totally get that.
So we'll see. In the meantime, we'll probably try from there, but.
Definitely, and like you said too, I'm always around, hit me up whenever, honestly, always happy to help. Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Oh, thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Oh, he's here. I'm always here.
Yeah, he would be here after the workshop.
I just had some questions about how to use the system.
Sure.
Collaboration.
Yeah, definitely.
Side step.
Okay.
I'm working with some people from the school of medicine.
Okay.
What we are trying to do is reduce the models, foundation models, develop foundation models.
Okay.
So there are several applications that were and also
Okay,
Great. So they have a grant from and I.
Okay.
So they are collecting as much.
Okay.
No, it's a very small.
Patients data they are collecting.
Okay, wow.
Each one is PSG, it's basically the EEG.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sure.
So there's a good amount of data.
Sure.
And so before the training, I mean, how you do this small model.
Right.
Never be on.
Right.
One single GP.
Uh-huh.
So what we are planning to do is develop a foundation model based on all the data. We have.
Sure.
And then we just play with the model with downstream.
Sure. Right.
We are just wondering what kind of collaboration.
Definitely.
Whatever.
Yeah, definitely. So, I don't. So at like, so I would definitely be happy to help, and would be in whatever capacity I would be useful.
Yeah.
As far as formal collaborations and like getting onto proposals and grants and so on.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not entirely, so of one thing, I know if you said it's NIH funded. Or
Right, so far.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think, so I was also, hockey professor and, actually, I was going to be on a NIH grant with her,
Oh,
but,
okay.
because I'm not a, Because I don't have a university appointment, I guess I can't be on like NIH or NSF grants. Right, I need that, I need to get like a case appointment through Chicago and work that out.
Okay.
Is like, so I think there's some limitation on like that part of it. But as far as like what I spend my effort and like time on and like, that's much more up to, so my boss supervisor Venkat, I don't know if you know, he's like the data science lead here at ALCF. And, he would maybe be the one, so in terms of like organizational and like efforts, he would have much more, I'm sure would be happy to hear about it and would be much, he would be able to give you a much better answer in terms of like how I would be available or in what capacity I would be able to like, officially support something.
Okay.
Yeah, and for lack of a better answer, I don't really know how it works specifically. And, it all just kind of, comes down to me at some point. But I would definitely be happy to, and I'm sure I know like, large language models, foundation models for science is very much what like Venkat and our research group is interested in actively working on pursuing. And so I'm sure he would definitely be, absolutely happy to talk more about it, hear more about it.
Great. That would be great.
Yeah, and he is probably gone for the day. But if you want to send me an email,
Okay.
so that I can just get your information, and then I'll reply back with Venkat and we can talk more about it or something.
Okay.
Does that work? Does that work?
Sure, absolutely. I will send you something tonight.
Sure, perfect. And then, and then I'll have your information and then I'll just send a reply and be like, hey, Venkat, Young, how do you pronounce it? Jung is interested in, talking more and has some interesting research and we'll, go from there.
Yeah, we can set up a meeting.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure. Perfect, perfect.
It's just along the sides, the sides of walls.
Okay, perfect. And so, as like I said, I'm sure that, and like I said, I know that this is something he's very interested in working on. And so, would be happy to talk about it.
Okay.
I just can't. Make any promises. That he's like,
I can't promise.
Right. But you need to. Definitely. Thanks for reaching out and appreciate I really appreciate it, honestly. Yeah.
To begin with, we can use myself with both the models, the ALS facilities.
Sure, and yes, for getting familiarity with the system and stuff.
And get some simple.
Yes, getting a feel for how things work and stuff. But then going beyond that, it's much bigger.
Great.
Effort for sure.
Talk about the director's discretionary funds.
Oh, yeah, so that's
I can start with that. So that's like,
yes.
get up and running on the systems and then it's, obviously anyone's open to collaboration, but it's like step forward for like, oh, you saw that you ran.
Want to get started and test it.
You started something. and
Yes.
We're both doing the same thing at the same time.
Yes, and they're pretty easy to, the allocations are pretty generally.
Like an hour, it's taking like an hour. or something,
It's really simple form.
Okay.
And so if you, send me an email, I'll reply back with that
Yeah.
link to it.
You'll burn through those hours.
You'll burn through them pretty quickly, but at least let you get on and, have an account and, collaborators accounts, whoever might need to get on the system and.
Okay.
Also easier to go from that to like, once you have that account, then you can add more hours, add people to the project and so on. It just makes it easier starting. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's much easier to just.
Appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. Perfect. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
See my message about it. Sorry, I know you're.
I have not, I think I've had, not the serve on.
Is anyone doing multi-bid? I tried, I finally was able to get an allocation, and it has some error that you out of. It's like telling it to run on.
Oh, so there, I said it should work. There are definitely combinations that will break it. So did you?
No.
How somebody,
Someone edited it?
so that, I think that somebody else probably tried something, and
So this was shared right up the cat, like I saw.
somebody else tried setting that changed that option in the deep sweep config JSON. Yes, because everybody's writing it.
You have to edit it, right? The JSON. I don't use.
At the moment, the args.sh file figures out the environment, figures out the variables, and then writes it to a JSON inside the shell.
Using one GPU.
It writes it out depending on the environment variables that it has already figured out. which is,
Those, whatever you got through. Those not working. We should definitely look back and like, see what we can do, get like, everything's gonna be perfect,
Yeah.
but like, what could be,
yes,
improved.
yeah, go, this is, yeah, away from how it is at the moment.
Yes.
Any
Yeah, now I'm
improvement
kind of
is-
convinced it's like broken, and you can't really like,
So what?
the way to have it was like, like everything else, like installation that's untouchable unless you. But yeah, I mean, understandable, like, you saw that they replied to me, like.
Yes, I did see that.
I guess on LM and like also it's like. Understands like the space intended use case.
And I don't think it's like entirely figured out. So, like in my head, this is always much more like anybody who were to want to try to use this would also, in my head, would also be, you know, familiar enough with like owning it and installing it in a virtual environment on top of it. That it would be like, and I also just imagine and expected that there would be within the next few weeks, even like changes to the main branch, which would then be missed in a static install. So 2 weeks from now, there's like drastic change, then it wouldn't, I would have to update it in the state environment. Or you would, but like, I also think we're like pretty rapidly changing, and I also wasn't clear how it would work, because I'd always done it in like an editable install in my environment.
It's gonna be.
And yeah, and then, you know, then he was like, oh, have a one that everybody can use. But we do that, you know, they were run through, so, yeah, it, you know, I got this today, but.
Yeah. He's the best to be asking about, it's like, yes. And then you know, how many of this is like, to me, that have to stay. So like, I've been over this before, it's, the driver's always been. Where you can, it's complex, I mean, I can get used to, but, yeah, it was just.
And you know, and, I'm still trying to find the balance between, ignoring him and then getting, why didn't you do this later?
Right. So which power level theme do you use? I use power level, you know, but maybe not for about a year, but I use with T-Max.
Yes, well, I have, but no, not like currently.
Absolutely. So I like I'll keep in touch. Once I run, I'll be able to keep in touch. What do you do when you like log on? Like to have multiplayer.
So I, so very, so. Like I have I've always been able to like, so by like SSH data. But like only the preferred. Yes, right.
Oh, I see. So you open up multiple tabs or like.
Yeah, I just like open a split, exactly, a split, you know, split pane or a new tab or.
Are you just kidding? Okay.
Yeah. But recently, there's this, Kitty has this like, wrapper around SSH that I've been using that like, it also uses the control master, but like, there's some, it also has like, we were talking about like the power line. This is nice that like, I can like image tab through it, like I can look at any JPEG, like you see and stuff. Previously, I was like, SSH fast, but like,
He was. He was not here, but someone gave me his.
like straight, like, you know, nice. Yeah. And they always have trouble with like
Getting the joint.
their image viewing. Yeah, there's this like, I think there's like T image or something that I had at some point.
Image tab is.
Yeah, I had image, yeah, maybe that, that's. And I've gone through like multiple different.
You're right, it's more
And then also like, because I had also at one point gotten this integrated in this like interactive Jupyter notebook terminal.
Except it doesn't seem to work within it makes sense inside
CMOS, okay, and so I know it's, but that was what they
These
were.
users are in different rank than the joint is.
And I think they were why I.
Actual joint is actually not busy.
And eventually it was like,
So
yeah.
there should be some kind of relation. That's why.
Yes.
in the-
well, so this is why I was gonna ask, since you're the only person I know that fancy Z shell is,
Should I just?
I think this is independent of Tmux, but
Python?
use like an id,
Yeah, when you.
like a id cap. On the right side, no, you don't have anything on your right.
I have like the time and it would be like,
Issues with like, I have size my windows.
yes, all the
All the
time.
time.
And it'll be like hanging over on the
And it's,
line.
it's unreadable all the time. Okay, so you.
So sometimes
If you
it,
disable, right, mode line, it goes away, but I don't want to. 'cause
oh,
I
yes,
use
right,
it-
right. And I've sometimes it seems I've been able to get away with it. I just was running like preset actually.
That never works for me.
Not always,
It's
sometimes it does,
basically-
sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it's like, I basically, turning my
Usually
hair
what,
out.
what happens when that, what I do when that happens is I'll just like, you know, shrink that shell, open a new one and restart.
Okay, so I'll lay it up for a solution, because I think it's not.
Yeah,
it's not
it's
something
okay.
to keep up.
I just, yes, I
I
mean,
need seashell theme on the right hand.
honestly, anytime I get launched into an interactive job on Polaris, it completely breaks my shell. I'm always like, launch into it, like launch a job, that launches me in a shell. I have this like save job env that prints all of the PBS Cobalt environments
Yeah.
variables to a file, and then log into a new,
And then.
log in, you know, into the compute node, from the login, and then source it in a different shell.
Well, I had a tab open for like 6 months where like.
Using multi GPUs, I can divide the
one
words.
Z shell, theme scripts.
Currently
that I've been using,
this-
like, there
It's
was
not getting.
very minimal
uh,
reproducer.
it's
and
getting
I'm
out of
trying to
memory
figure out how to like,
for-
you know, fix this reset is working. The only thing is sometimes it's like if I'm typing in the window like this and I maximize it. then it's
Yes,
just
yes, I've seen that too, or like,
This-
yeah, I've tried, yes, that's so
Alright, well,
funny,
let me know
I've
if you
tried
find it.
that's so funny, I've tried so many like, yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
have a Nobel by now.
yeah.
Put down this week's goal.
If you look at the.
By the way, I forgot to message you on Slack.
Oh,
So I just saw it like.
no worries.
Yeah, it's good.
No, no,
It was best effort of life. I posted it on what, Monday? I meant to do it last week anyway. It's not even a big deal. People are aware of the environment and I posted about it, so.
Actually, Venka told me like right before my talk.
How's it going?
Well, I was measuring this.
What are you looking for?
Me to tell people, so.
Oh, I see.
I should have done it earlier, too.
Not lit, not, nope, not lit.
And it was, yeah, like I said.
Yeah, no problem.
It was really last minute.
And then the recipe as it was here.
So, yeah, you need to.
All right, yep, success, we got through it.
This, it would automatically.
Yeah, I'll see you, are you gonna be here tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah.
Yes, I plan to be here in the morning, but I've got an
I'm stacking.
I'm just, there's kind of torn, I got an appointment that like, that I gotta be back downtown for in the afternoon. Like, big torn, I really, kind of wish we had a remote, you know, I would love to participate, but I have to drive there, so we'll see, I'm not sure yet. We'll see.
That has multi-node?
What's up?
Why didn't they just do hybrid for this?
Are you on Slack?
You know, I'm guessing there's an DTO, he's one of the organizers, but I don't know, why didn't you guys do it hybrid? The powers that be wanted everybody to be here?
Guessing is a question which I don't know.
Which is not fair, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Push towards being back in lab, I'm guessing, I don't really know why, honestly. Yeah, I can't really think of any reasons why not to, so. But, you know, for whatever reason they didn't, so we'll see. But, yeah, we'll see, I'll see you. Either way, I'll be, you know, well, I'm sure I'll see you, we'll talk again soon, for sure. Have a good rest of the day, though.
Oh, I'm getting like 0.9.
I don't know.
Get all your problems worked out, everything working? Good?
I got the plug.
Did you get it? Good. You're like, I was like, oh, all right.
All the.
Much easier.
All of them.
And it's always so funny when I like see, I'm like watching somebody give a presentation through a demo or something, I'm like. I'm like, oh, that's good. Yeah, it's so fun. It's so funny. And I really do like, spend so much time like working on, customizing things and like, playing with things that like I love when people ask me questions about it, like.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like the way I can hand down the parts.
Oh,
the gives, and then the color.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, I
This command exists.
And a lot of it is like, yes, are there better ways of spending my time than like changing this third shade of blue? Probably. But like I do think that there are like definitely there are also a lot of convenience
Yeah.
things that I've gotten out of it that I'll
Thank
see you.
so much. I'll see
Yep.
you tomorrow.
Yep.
And we still, yeah, we are gonna be
I don't know if I'll be
contacting.
here tomorrow.
Oh.
Maybe, honestly though, maybe I will. I don't, yeah, I've had a couple other people ask me now. But otherwise, yeah, any time to hit me up on Slack.
Yeah, I know, sir.
Yeah, any questions at all, talk about something, this doesn't work. Anything at all, honestly, yeah, always happy to talk.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you in person as well, too. Yeah, I'm sure, yeah, well, I'm sure we'll be talking again more soon.